Okay, so today, or this session, we want to talk to you about purchasing. First things first, we have this report that's very similar to the report you use now. It's called the Purchase Requirements Report. It's a rolling 24-month report. You see your current month is highlighted at the top. We have history and sales and case quantity. And then we have an estimate that will do the same. If there are zeros, this is not tied out, this is not finished yet. But you will not see zeros, you'll just see blanks. Okay? It's grouped by vendor, sorted by item number, and then up top you'll see a lot of other useful item information about it. We have quantity information up top. I guess I should use my mouse. Quantity information, we have weights, your next ETA quantity, and then we have some pallet information over here. This will be auto-bursted every month, the first of the month. And I know Jamie put a lot of effort into this, so I'm not sure, do you want to say anything else about it?
Just a quick note that we did get the request today to expand it to 8.5 by 14, so it's going to be on the wider, so it'll spread out for you guys so you have room to write on it. So Jerry and I have been working together on this, and this is where we've gotten, as we get sales history into your system, we'll be able to send this to you. And can you show them, do you have the folder up where it's located?
Oh, yeah.
So the goal will be for us to email burst it to you, and then you can print it out. So we'll schedule it to go out maybe the first of the month. That's so that, because a lot of those inventory quantities that you have on this are going to be as of the first of the month anyway. So that's the way that it was designed. However, it will be available for you, especially now in testing, it'll be available for you to run so you can take a look at the report. You can pick it by vendor and date range, that kind of thing.
So it's located here in your reports folder under the purchasing subfolder?
We don't have to run it or anything, but just so you
No,
know where
just,
that is.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's located there. All right, so what you want to take away from this session here, we want you to, over the next couple weeks, go ahead and enter about 10 to 20 test POs so you feel comfortable going through and learning how to do that. But to get there, there's several different ways, as you've probably heard before. You can get here up here through the toolbar under transactions, purchasing, and purchase order entry. You could also use the module here, and then your purchase order entries up top. Let's go ahead and select that. And now we'll just walk through and how to set up a PO. Oops. All right, so first thing, I like to tab through, do whatever is best for you, but it's going to go ahead and set up your next sequential PO number. Now these PO numbers are tests, we don't have your PO numbers in there, so whatever number you give us, it's going to go ahead and start after that, okay? And then next we have our buyer ID. You can actually type ahead if you'd like. See how Barbara's name pops up? I've been using her as a test through this whole thing. Or you could use your hourglass here and select your buyer. And again, we have to clean these up, so the only ones you're going to see are Greg, Barbara, and Thomas. Next we come to dates. Now dates are pretty important. So this date that you see here is the PO date itself. But when you go in and click this blue expansion arrow, we have a couple other dates that that you're going to use. So only two that you're going to use in here are promised date and promised ship date. Now they sound very similar. We can't change it. It's a core GP thing. But your team has decided to use promise date as the ship date that the vendor is going to send it. So when you enter a PO, I believe you guys know that date that they're going to ship it, correct? So that's the one you want to enter here.
Well, it's the date that we're requesting them to ship.
Yes,
They may
okay.
or may not actually ship
Okay,
it.
okay.
Which then affects the delivery date.
Gotcha. So that's that there, and this will show up on your PO as ship date. Now this next one, you're going to leave alone. It's promised ship date. For now, you're going to leave it alone. So what this one is, it's going to be your scheduled ETA. So when they call and say, hey, we're going to come with a shipment on September 1, and this is where you want to go back in and update that date. We have some workbooks that I'll show you later that you could do, multiple if you'd like.
Does it hurt to put in the anticipated delivery date?
The only thing that would affect that is that the system would think it's already scheduled, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the big thing is when you have that, some of the workbooks that he'll show you, we have logic built in there that says when the promised ship date is equal to the PO date, meaning it's not scheduled yet because you haven't touched that date yet, then say not scheduled. So that's a good flag to you, hey, they haven't called me to actually
Correct.
schedule and confirm whether they're gonna meet that
So it's
requested
better to
timeline.
just leave-
Better to leave it for now,
Leave it.
until you actually get that call and want it to be considered as scheduled on your
Correct.
workbooks.
Wow.
Correct.
And that's where you can manipulate that promise date so that you can have a ship date print on your PO, and you have that promise date to say, here's when I really want it, you know.
Okay. So those are the dates there. And then next I'm going to come over to my vendor ID. Now currently you have in your system you have your vendor ID but set up with multiple vendor origins. The way we're going to go through Infusion is that we're going to have each vendor origin is going to be its own vendor. So it's going to have its own ID and everything. Okay? So the vendor I'm going to choose, and this is kind of an example here, you'll see that we have Diageo North America, but then there's several other ship points that we have that are dashes. So I'm going to select this one. And move on to my item numbers. So you can go ahead and type these in if you know them. You can use the hourglass if you'd like, and go in here and select them. You could also do a find button here as well to find your item number. I tabbed over it. If you'll see this thing called P-case, all this really is it's telling you is that it's the purchasing pack size. So if you do, well, it's just your purchasing pack size. So next you want to enter your quantity ordered. And if you see over to the right over here under unit cost up here, this is going to be your current FOB right here. It's going to automatically default to that. You can type over it if you know it's changed. It will not go into the system and update it automatically, but you can write over it here. Go ahead and enter a couple more. Okay. So now that we have those entered, let's talk a little bit about notes. There's all kinds of notes that you could attach with your PO or attach to a vendor. We'll go through and look at some of those. So first, under your additional menu, down here under PO specific notes, hit the plus sign here, and then note type. We have PO and receiving. Now, your PO note is going to be specific to that PO. So when you print that, it's going to print up on the bottom of the special instructions on the PO, and we'll walk through that and I'll show you. Now it is important, you can only have one PO note because that's all the room we have on the PO for that to show up on. Over here, we have a receiving note. Now the receiving note is going to show up on your receiving reports. Pre-receiving report and your receiving report. And click OK. And we also have PO shipping notes. This PO note is actually going to be set up at the vendor level. So every single time you order from that vendor, that PO note, this PO note here, will show up on each PO.
And Matt is editing that on the PO, but it actually lives on the vendor card. So from the vendor, you can set up that note and it will show here, but you can also edit it in the purchase order just like he's doing as well. So if you needed to change that note, but every time you change it, it's affecting all POs from this point forward.
This is the same that we looked at, Barbara, yesterday. We'll get to that on that form, but the same note that we talked about yesterday. So we also have this shipping terms note. I'm not sure if you're using that.
Is it on their PO?
No.
No.
No, I don't think you're using that, so you can disregard that.
All that does is separate two types of notes, but if you didn't leave room for it on your PO, there's probably not much use for. But we could if you needed to.
Okay, and then we have all these internal notes. If you see over here next to the PO number, you could just, it's not going to print on your PO or anywhere else. It's just going to be there for you internally when you go back inside the PO. And if you can see here, I did one already for Barbara. Every time Barbara buys something, it's going to, see how the little turns yellow, I guess. And I just put buyer note in there, but there's a note for that there. See over here by the vendor ID, and then over here, this comment ID, you've decided to use this as your carrier. So I guess, do you know your carrier right away for the most part? So go ahead and you can enter that here. So we'll enter Western Carrier on this one. Actually, it's sent to Pace.
And if it's a new one, you can just type directly into that and add a new comment ID.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. And next we have another one, a line item note. So you can drill into the behind the scenes with the item. If you select the item here and hit this blue expansion arrow up top, it'll drill down in there, and you'll see the most important thing here is going to be your landed cost group. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So your landed cost group, you're going to have one assigned, each item is going to have one landed cost group assigned to it. So the one you use the most is the one that you should go ahead and set up with that item. But if you do need to change it, say you're ordering it stateside, but then all of a sudden you need to order DI or the other way around, you can click this hourglass and go through and find your freight lane and assign it to this PO. So if you are using a DI landed cost, I'd mentioned before, I'm not sure everybody was here, but it will come in as your landed cost will have 0 on the Fed tax. So if you do get into that, don't panic. The Fed tax is actually stored at the item card, and we have a trigger that when we receive it, it'll pull it into that landed cost. And Corey will talk more about that when she receives some POs later on. All right, so now we want to print the PO. I'm just going to print this to screen, just to go over this first. And there's other options that I'll go over after this. Okay, well, I should have selected a date here, but I didn't. I apologize. This is that ship date that you were supposed to go ahead and enter right away that we talked about. So this is that ship date that's going to end up on your PO. Over here we have ship via and load type, and we've discussed that with your project team. We have that in development right now. It'll be a window that you could select both of these fields from, but we don't have that completely finished yet. Next, you'll see your carrier here, and I selected Pace. And the warehouse, we're going to leave, but since we're using those new ship points, you're going to set up those ship points with their own address, so you don't necessarily need to know what warehouse it's coming from, because it'll tell you here under the vendor. And then you've got your detailed information here. Your total quantity, we have your weight information. Now the weight information is only as good as the data that you provided. So if the item doesn't have weight, then it's not going to populate here. We have your total case cost here. And then down at the bottom, we have the notes I was talking about. We have your test PO note and your test every PO note. And down here, the CC, this will actually come from your primary address that you have set up with the vendor. It'll pull that email address from that field right here for contact information. And over here, you would requested to add the buyer information as well. So we have Barbara's name and her email address. Any questions about the PO or anything before I move forward?
Well, Wouldn't be uncommon for somebody to make a mistake, even like the one that you ate.
Yep.
I mean, they can go back into the PO and edit it. correct?
That was my next, yep,
Okay.
yep, absolutely.
Also PO splits.
Yep. So, that's a good point, thank you, Jamie. Let's just go back in and show you how to do that, actually. Okay, so to edit it, if you actually, I'll show you, if you don't click this checkbox over here, and you actually just double click it, it's going to turn into an inquiry screen. So you can only view the PO, but not be able to change anything about the PO. So to edit it, you want to go over and check the checkbox, and come up here under Edit. And Jamie had just mentioned that if you know that you have an item that you're going to transfer to another distributor, you can come in here under the line item again, hit the blue expansion arrow, and under Additional, we have PO Split. So PO Split here, you're going to select the person that you're going to set this aside for. And then you're going to select the quantity allocated for that. Now you have three, as you can see, you have 3 customers that you can set aside stuff for, but that's where we had set that up for you. But yes, Mike, you can go ahead and now you can edit the quantities if you'd like. You could, again, edit the FOBs, delete the item numbers. To do that, you just want to select in here, and you can select delete row, and it'll delete that whole item number for you.
Can you talk a little bit?
Referring to the fact of if some of the on order was to pay back a distributor we borrowed goods from?
Yes.
Is that what you were
Yep.
referring to?
Yes.
It
Yep.
allows you to keep a record of keeping that kind of separated out.
And
for
it
your team.
it subtracts it out of your on order amount that's shown in packages. That was the reason
Yeah.
that you wanted it done.
Did you have something to add? I thought you were going to say something.
Yeah, I forgot.
Just chime in whenever.
Okay. Chime in when I remember.
Okay.
Oh, quantity canceled. I remember. Yeah. Can you talk
Yep.
about if they wanted to move that and record it that way?
Yes. So we have this quantity canceled field here. So say a vendor's, this is really important because you just don't want to change the amount that you're ordering because say the vendor has a quota that they'd like you to meet. You can go ahead and select quantity canceled if they can't meet that, your order here. And that way you can show the vendor, hey, I tried to order 15, you didn't have them, so that'll help with that. And next here, we have on the nav pane, we have purchase orders not printed, purchase orders not received, purchase orders not invoiced. So the first couple I'll talk about, and it's kind of like a path that you go through. It's based on the status here. So if you'll see, we have our search criteria as status. So when you enter a PO and you haven't printed it or anything, it's going to be new. It's going to stay new until you print it. Once you print it, it's going to move from new to released. And I'll show you that here. So I've already printed this one, and I changed the amount, so that's actually pretty good. So if you do go in and you do change the amount or change something about the PO, it will move from release to change order, okay? And actually on your PO, I'll go ahead and, this is a good one. So if you do have a change order, there'll be an indication on the PO saying that we do have a change order. So it'll have an asterisk next to the item, and then it'll tell you up here that this is a change order. So when you send it in to the vendor, it doesn't think that you're just ordering again, you're just modifying the one that you've already sent.
But that only pops up, that change order, the first time that you reprint it,
Yep.
right?
Yep, so once you print it, so now if I try to print it again, that will disappear. It'll change back to released, the status itself. And if you can see here, it says released. Now, you can come in here and you can cancel a partial order but the whole line, we have an overall PO status, and then we have a line item status. So you can come in here and you can cancel 10 of them just to show you. So now it's a change order, but this whole line won't say canceled unless you cancel them all. Same with the whole PO. So if you don't cancel the entire, all the lines, excuse me, and they all say canceled, this status will not change from released to canceled. I apologize about that. I hit the wrong thing. And next, when you receive it, and Corey will talk more about that when she receives, it'll move into not invoiced. And then it'll say the status is actually received after you've received the entire PO. You can receive a partial of the PO, but the whole thing won't change to received until you've received the entire thing.
One thing about new, Matt, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you said that. When you first enter the PO, it's the status of new before you print it. Just as a note, this comes up sometimes in support. It won't show as on order until you release it. So until you hit that print button or until you do whatever, it doesn't really show as on order on the item. It doesn't show in your open POs because it's looking for released or change ordered, because released is the system's way of thinking you are ready to send it out to the world. If it's new, you're still pondering on it. You know, you're not positive. You haven't committed. So make sure, even if you're just printing it to screen, you need to print it to screen to flip that status to release before it really will go on order.
Okay. Now I want to go back in here and just show you real quick. I mentioned that you have other options besides print. So you can go ahead and directly email it to the vendor. So to do that, we have a couple of different forms. So to print your PO, you want to select blank paper. But to email it, we're going to select other form. And we're going to hit this print button here. And we want to leave it here to printer or delivery system. So we're going to go here and select OK. Then it's going to prompt you and ask you, hey, do you want to print or do you want to deliver? In our case, we want to deliver. And once we hit that deliver, Outlook's going to, oh, interesting. Well,
I think
Probably
I'll just set
behind.
up on that.
Something's-
I don't think it's set up on a better.
Okay. It may be the.
can we
box.
log in there and show them? No.
Yeah, it's just-
All right, so what's going to happen is Outlook's going to pop up and it's going to generate an email already, and it's going to go to that purchasing email address, and it's going to automatically generate there, and it's going to attach the PO as a PDF. From there, you can enter other email addresses if you'd like. If you do enter them, they're not going to update the card and add those email addresses into that address field. You have to go back there and do that manually. It'll also give you a chance to review it and make sure you're sending it to the right place, sending the right PO. You can add text in the body of the email if you'd like.
We also.
show the field on the vendor card where that email is located.
Yeah.
We also have, while you're getting there, the ability to do kind of a standard template email. If you want, when you email a PO, for it to always say, here's your PO. Love Hartley and Parker. You know, whatever you want that to say. Then we can structure that for you, and then you can personalize it for each one. But if you're always typing the same type of thing, remember, we can set that up for you.
So add the vendor card, and let me go back. It's under cards, purchasing, and vendor. I know a couple guys in the back haven't been here before. The cards are actually where all your master information is stored. So to go to your vendor card, you'll have all that information about that vendor there. So we'll go ahead and select this here. And then your address button. And then if you'll search over to the purchasing address, and then click this little globe. This is where we store the email address. And this is what's going to pop up on your PO and when you email it. It'll pop up on the bottom where that CC was and set it up to email.
Can you only put one email there?
No, you can put several.
Or there is one for?
Yep.
Do semicolon.
Yep. We already have some vendors set up like that. inside.
And I used to say it's unlimited, but that's not true. Somebody did find the limit finally, that had a really long domain, and then they put like, I don't know, 10 of those guys with really long domains. So if you ever ran into that, I've only had that happen like twice at distributors. You can create an email group on your server, and then you put the email group there, and then you can exchange people in and out of that. But typically, most of the times, especially in the PO world, people don't run into an issue with that. Just make sure you use semicolon, not a comma, not a colon, semicolon. That does make a difference.
Yeah, we do mostly email and.
So we're getting this data from your team out of your current system. So that'll be something to be reviewing. We have this loaded in from the last round of data, so this will be something for you guys to pay attention to as you're testing. Make sure you see what you expect to see there.
If they're testing and they do the email things, it actually email it.
It won't auto send the email. It just
Yeah.
pops it up. You can exit out.
Then you have to press the send button.
If you
to
press
it.
send, it will send.
Okay.
Maybe don't do that.
Send. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so next we have, as always, some smart lists. So under smart list, your purchasing folder here. Let's just go under purchase orders to show. Now, you can go under purchase order folder, and then this little asterisk right here. If you select that, it'll tell you everything about, this is kind of like unfiltered, about all the POs up here. And we have several that we've set up for you. These here with the asterisks are a GP core smart list, but we've set up several others for you. Now, if you do want to set something up to where you can view it a lot, we can help you with that. We can show you how to do it.
Paula can help you with that.
Yes.
You know how to do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was faster already.
But this is just kind of like our forms, kind of like a one-stop shop to see all your open POs. It won't give you the line detail, but it'll show you, you have your dates and your totals and your vendor and all that. So it's a good place to go look if you're trying to look up a whole bunch of information at once. Anybody have any questions about that before I move forward to show you about our forms and reports?
Yeah, I got a few.
Okay.
But what did you click on the
Oh.
smart,
To get there,
on the left side there? What did you click on?
Microsoft Dynamics GP.
No.
Oh.
The smart list that you.
Oh, okay, let me pull that back
The
up.
last thing you just clicked on.
I think that might have been an accident. But to get there, you open it up, purchasing folder here, and then you just hit your plus arrows to find, like, if you want to see more information about the purchase orders that way. Does that answer your question?
No, that's not my question.
Okay.
So maybe you emailed and maybe you didn't.
I believe that would be in your sent, right?
Huh?
I think it's in the,
It goes out your Outlook.
Will there be anything on the PO to refer to the fact that it got sent?
No, it
No.
just says the status changes to released, and it means you either printed it or emailed it, but there's nothing that logs whether you printed it or whether you emailed it. You'd have to look out your
You have
Outlook,
to go to
your sent folder in your
sent
Outlook.
folder to verify.
But what your team did have us do is put the email address that we're pulling, the same field we're pulling from to send an email, we're also printing that at the bottom of the PO so that you're able to see on a printed PO, here's who it would have gone to if it was sent. So you can kind of have a record of what is recorded at that vendor for who's receiving them, if they say they never got them or something like that.
Or to look in your Outlook, search capability.
Yeah.
Now, the next question. So, some people confirm, some don't. It'd be nice to know when you're doing the PO, those that confirm, and you don't need to know those that don't. Those that do confirm, and then at some point, the fact that they did confirm, and that the order now is confirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. One of your dates, are you using one of those already as a confirm? I think you probably have a date
Scheduling.
available.
We do, we have the required date available.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yep.
if you go into that, pull that up.
Sure.
Not just on a PO. So what I have a lot of distributors do, Jerry, is use one of those dates. Now, the required date will default to the same date as the PO date, just like all the others when you're manually entering a PO. But if that date is different, then, you know, meaning they sent it and the person confirmed back, they change that date, and then they know those are the ones that have confirmed and on what date they confirmed it. And then they run a smart list, same kind of thing. We do a little smart list that says those that are confirmed, which means that that data is different, and they know that that means that they confirm back to them. Now, as far as knowing which ones confirm and which ones don't, I don't think you have anything you've identified in the vendor card, but I think you probably have a field available somewhere in the vendor card that we can mark something, and that can be added to a filter. You just need to give us that list of that, and we can define a field, so I can list that as a field for you to enter into.
Also, if there's a time frame by which a confirm does not come back, which might
Yes.
indicate they either lost it or something happened.
Yes.
Is there any kind of a pop-up?
Well, that smart list, you can do that range, whatever date range you felt, like today minus what, you know, how many ever days out from the PO date. Plus that, you could put into a smart list to show you as an alert. You just need to give us the criteria and we can help you set up that smart list.
It hasn't come back yet.
Like if it's a 1 week past or 2 weeks past
Yeah,
or,
like a couple of weeks or something,
Yeah.
or 10 days.
or sometimes they like it. I had one that was like, you're using which date for what you expect them to ship it to, the promise date?
Promise date.
They said if it wasn't X days before the promise date, you know, so maybe you do it backwards that way. I should have at least had a confirmation by then.
Right, and when you cancel, if you want to cancel with the supplier, I understand how you cancel it on here.
Mm-hmm.
But what were you saying as far as canceling to the supplier?
Okay.
You know, sending the message to the supplier that this is now canceled.
Correct. So you'll select your canceled item here, and I suppose email it back to them.
Well, if you moved part of it to canceled, then it becomes a change order. When you reprint the entire PO, you have an asterisk beside that line that indicates there's a change on that line, and that'll show the supplier that adjustment
So you
of the
cancel
quantity.
whole order.
Yeah, it'll say that there's none on order anymore. So it won't say the word canceled. We don't have that in there. But it will show the adjusted quantity. So if they've canceled 10 cases out of the 15, it now shows that you still have 5 on order. And it'll put an asterisk to indicate that's a
If
change.
you cancel the entire order, you send a change order with nothing on it?
Oh, the
No,
entire PO?
Most people don't.
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
I don't think I have anybody that does that.
So what do you send to the supplier if you want?
Nothing. Usually you're getting told to cancel the whole PO, or they call or email and say, hey, this PO is canceled, don't do it.
No,
But,
we cancel it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we don't do anything here to do that, we just.
Just
Yeah,
send.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Did you
Now,
go-
the one thing about cancel before we go on, we have a smart list also under purchase order lines, Matt. That should, I think, called canceled line items. One thing that's nice about that cancel quantity, and this is your internal decision to do on purchasing, but what a lot of my distributors do, if you have like Diageo or some vendors that have purchase requirements through the year, like you've got to meet certain goals maybe on how much you're supposed to purchase from them, and they continually out of stock you, and you're trying to meet those purchase goals, that's what they use quantity canceled for. So if it was, I ordered it wrong, you know, like, hey, I ordered 15, oh, I changed my mind, I really only want 10, they just change the quantity on the PO. And again, this is an internal decision, but just to give you some thought. If it is that the vendor is canceling me quantities, they move it then to quantity canceled, because within the PO here, you can see Matt clicked on purchase line items, canceled PO lines. You can search in this smart list to a certain vendor, through a certain date range, all of those kind of things within the search criteria, and it'll tell you how much you've put as quantity canceled for that vendor. So if internally you've said, the reason we cancel it versus changing the quantity on the line item, because that does the exact same thing in the net effect of the PO, is because we want to record when the vendor has changed it on us, not when I decided to change it. Then this is a great record for you to go back to your supplier and say, listen, here's all the items I've tried to order over the last 6 months and you keep canceling me. And that's not my fault then. I'm trying to meet that purchase requirement and, you're hurting me. So, so they use that field with that internal specification. So it's a powerful tool if you do decide to use it that way, and then that's helpful for your organization.
You didn't happen to use an item where their case pack is different than ours in your purchase order?
No, but that's a good point.
No.
You want to talk about that P case versus
The P case, yeah, I briefly mentioned that in the beginning. But yeah, you'll see here, this P case, all that means is that it's going to be the pack size that you purchase it with that vendor for. So whether it's different than you're selling or not, it's going to be that pack size there. Does that answer your question?
Not sure.
So,
I think half of the answer.
so on the new item
I
form,
think half the answer.
so on the new item form, when we talked about yesterday, picking that unit of measure schedule, and part of the unit of measure schedule at the end, if it's a case 12 and you buy it in 6 packs, but you sell it in 12, it's gonna be a case 12, 750, M6 at the end. So the end of that unit of measure is going to be your purchasing pack size. So if you select, as long as the item is set up properly, then we do the math to say, okay, the purchasing pack size is 6 and the selling pack size is 12. So when you're doing a PO, it drops in as P case or purchasing case, which is a 6-pack, and the FOB is based on it being a 6-pack. But when you're selling it to the customer, it comes in as case, which is a 12-pack. So we do the math on that for you.
So we enter our cases?
Yeah.
Or the supplier's cases?
suppliers.
When you're purchasing, it's the
Suppliers.
supplier's cases.
When you sell it, it's yours.
So they've cut it in, if we ordered 44, but it's 22 of our cases, they would enter 44. And
That's
our
right.
order would show 22.
Correct.
Yep.
All right, so now I want to show you a couple of forms and reports that we have. Again, they're located in your reports folder under purchases. The first one we have is open purchase orders. So this is just going to be a form here showing you all of your open purchase orders. Again, it's an Excel form. It should refresh every time, but it's not a bad idea to go in and hit refresh. That way it pulls back all of the latest information. So what we have over here is just some filtering criteria if you want to get down to a certain vendor, a certain class, dates, and so forth. I will show you with dates, if you do want to select a range of dates, you can come down here and select multiple items. You can do that with any of these fields, and you can select through, each of these dates. Now down at the bottom, you'll see your PO number, your vendor name, and one thing I want to note about right here, kind of what we talked about before, if your PO date is equal to that promised ship date, it's going to say not scheduled right here. So the system knows that, or thinks that, hey, you haven't scheduled this for delivery yet, so it'll say not scheduled. The ones that have been scheduled will have their dates filled in. Over here, you'll see your item numbers, your descriptions, and then your quantity on order as well. We do have a note that we need to add to where we're going to show the PO split items that are set aside for those other distributors or someone you're paying back or what have you. Any questions about this form? All right, the next one is going to be review POs on trucks. So again, I'll go in and I'll hit refresh. So now you're going to see just the header line of your PO. So it's not going to give you any detailed information, but you'll see that who your vendor name is, your PO date itself, and then your PO arrival date. These are the main important ones. We have your truck ID over here and your new arrival date. So if you decide, hey, this guy is going to schedule a date, say September 5th. So you want to come in here and you want to select September 5th. Interesting, the buttons went away. There we go. That was weird. Okay. So if you know that your ETA is arriving on the 5th, you're going to go ahead and say update truck and ID. I'll hit that button there. It'll take a couple seconds. And you can do multiple at the same time as well. And this is what that form is really designed for. Okay. And then I hit refresh again, and you'll see that the PO date has now changed to the 5th of September. This also tells the system that the PO has been scheduled, because it's now going to be a different date than your PO date. You can do the same if you are switching trucks. So if I'm switching from Pace to Western Carriers, I can do that as well. And it should move, yeah, it's going to move a lot faster. So that'll update with inside the system and switch those trucks to the new truck. Any questions about this form? I should also mention you can come in here, it shows your weight, so you can validate the weight there and your cases on the truck.
Can any of these forms include the buyer code in case?
Case quantity?
No, in case they want to sort based on the buyer.
On the buyer?
Buyer 1, buyer 2, buyer 3.
I think buyers.
I don't, not this one, maybe the open POs.
It's
So-
right there.
PO buyer ID.
Oh,
PO buyer and.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. They can't select on it, but they can, well,
Like a
you
C.
can filter. If you add a filter to the top, it's just Excel. So go to that, row 5D. Just click your cell on 5D.
Or they could sort it.
Yeah. You can put a filter once, yeah, that gets there. No, it's not. Like,
It's not popping up.
It's
I tried
protected.
earlier. Yeah.
It's just protected. But they can definitely, you know, it's Excel, so they could copy it off. We could add a filter.
I don't know, sometimes it doesn't click into me.
All right, the next one is we have a truck consolidation report. So when we run that, that's going to be in your same folder. I'm going to go ahead and keep my same criteria. Generally, you're just going to run this for 1 day, but I want to get a date range just to make sure that we pull in some information.
It's the reports folder.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah,
which is
I
on
got
the
it.
infusion file.
So this is here where you're going to select your dates. And this is the, these are actually mandatory. Some of these are optional on other reports. But I'm going to select my date range here. And then I'm going to select what truck I expect this to come on. So now that I switched it to Western Carrier, we'll see that other, that's a bad example. Sorry about that. So this will consolidate all your POs for that date that you expect these POs to arrive. And it'll show you your truck information here, the vendor it's coming from. We have your PO numbers here, your case equivalents, your total weight. And then again, this is a place for you to verify your total weight that's coming on the truck. And then we have buyer information down here at the bottom. Any questions about this report? Okay. And the last one I want to go over real briefly is this vendor entry form. And I've already staged this here. So I have set this up as another ship point for Diageo. You have the option, again, these orange fields are required. You have the option to put the vendor, on hold if you'd like. And then when I enter my vendor name, it's going to automatically populate that name into this licensee name and check name. But you can type over those if you'd like, if they're different. Next, we have our class ID. I'm guessing 95% of the time you're going to select inventory. And this is that vendor lookup button that's kind of similar to the customer that we talked about earlier. And you can come in here, and it's not a full type ahead, but if you know the first initial, you can type in and then select down that way. So if I know it's Diageo, I can come in and look, and this is actually good for your vendor points because if you don't know the vendor number of the reporting vendor, you can come in here and see. So if I don't know Diageo's 10, I can come in here and reference that here.
And just as a reminder what reporting vendor is, do you want to describe that?
I got you, yeah. Next we'll talk about, and I'll talk about what she's talking about right here, down here at the bottom. So every single vendor is going to need a primary address set up to it. So I just filled this in so the system knew that it was filled out. And again, there's going to be orange required fields here. But then you can set up additional addresses if you'd like. You can name them whatever you'd like. And Barbara and I did that yesterday. So if you don't want to name it purchasing or whatnot, you can name it whatever you'd like. And you'll have to add that in there. Next, we have our credit limit, whether it's unlimited, none, or a certain amount. And this is where you want to set those addresses up to go to their proper places. So when you select purchase at address ID, it's going to pull like that email information we talked about earlier. Once you have this set up to purchasing, you can come down here and select purchasing. Then the system will know that, hey, every time you send a vendor a PO, send it to purchasing, use that information there. And do the same with remit to and ship from. Right here we have a couple of comments that you can add that will go with the vendor. Next we have payment terms. Now Barbara had mentioned yesterday that I believe accounting does the payment terms, you said? So I thought this would be a good time maybe just to, do you want to set up a net 30 every time? Because this is required, so I don't know if you want to set up a net 30 and then have accounting go in and change it afterwards.
No,
Oh.
yeah, just have it default to net 30.
Default to net 30?
And if we have to change it, like, well, we have some direct debit customers,
Okay.
suppliers, but I would just default it to net 30.
Yeah, I think default to net 30 is probably the
Just for the
easiest.
most
part.
Go in and change it.
What
Okay.
about the credit limit?
Now, credit limit,
Just
we
leave
don't
it all
know credit.
unlimited. Just leave it all, just always pick unlimited.
And that one's not required too, so.
Yeah, that's true. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter,
Yeah, 'cause we really don't know.
just have it complete, just always pick unlimited, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We never pay attention to that.
Okay.
Well, we don't, I couldn't tell
Yeah.
you what I'm doing.
No, that's what I said. I couldn't tell you.
Constellation.
It's not nearly as important.
I
as
can,
the
I
rest.
can tell you fifth generation's over $1 million because they ship us that much stuff.
Credit limit.
So I don't know if we've had that much outstanding with them, more actually, so
Yeah.
it's not really,
It is always
Relevant.
unlimited though.
Okay.
so.
And I need to back up a little bit. So we do need to add a depletions address. So in order to send depletions. So actually, do you want to do that in
Is that
here or
something you guys
inside the
know
card?
For the
Yeah.
depletions? We'll talk more about that in the Bill Backs training, but is it something that you know as far as where the depletions are going to be reported when you're setting up that vendor? Or does she usually go back and?
I don't know, because we send depletion reports separate from the bill back side of the actual invoicing.
Yeah.
That would be someone down the other end of the hall, not sure what, I don't think we're sending them right now.
Because
They
Gary
be
used to
Jen.
do
I don't
it,
know
right?
who's
Oh.
doing them.
No,
Jen
they're,
used to then-
Dominique for the most part.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we might, I'm gonna make a note, let's talk about that during bill backs a little
Okay.
bit
Okay.
more, when we kind of have the right.
But we would have to set
Mindset.
up a payables address though here.
Yeah. And primary is going to be, so what your primary address is going to be is normally payables.
Okay.
So that's when you set that up.
Okay.
But like Jamie said, she'll go over, you have to have the
Yeah.
depletion set up with the email address and all that for it to send.
now, Matt, do the
Yeah.
payment terms drive how we pay? In other words, when Kathleen is going into select invoices for payment, does it flagger, now, because this is for every vendor, not just purchasing vendors.
Sure.
So we have, like, the people we get our diesel from, it's 110 net 30. So if we set that vendor up at 110 net 30, will it prompt her to pay that invoice,
Yes.
within that 10 days?
Yes. Yeah.
Will it allow her to take the discount anyway, even if it's outside the 10 days?
Well, so-
Because our diesel company is
Yeah.
notoriously bad. They send us
Yeah.
the bill after the 10 days. And they
Okay.
know that they're screwed up, so they always allow us to take that.
So,
Yeah, that
on
I'm
the
not really sure.
terms, you do have the ability in GP to set up those discounted terms. It really accrues the discount, and it really will hit it to another GL account if you forfeit the discount, so that you can monitor who's not paying. Like, if you had multiple AP clerks and somebody's not paying, you can actually track who's missing their discount terms. I suggest not doing that unless you're really gonna stick to it. Most of my distributors, they kind of take the discount regardless. It's their discretion, not held to those dates. If that's how you do it, name the term that, but don't set up the options on the payment term setup. You have all the little boxes that say if it's within 5 days, take this percentage. Don't do that part then. Just call the term and set it up as like net 15 or net 20, but don't make it dependent. And then when you enter the amount in payables, enter it as if you're going to take the discount regardless, instead of letting the term do the discount. So we can talk about that more later in AP.
Okay.
But that would be my suggestion if you're really gonna take the term regardless of the window. Because if you set it up like that, it triggers all sorts of GL entries, and it's gonna make you stick to that window, and it's gonna record when you forfeit it. But if that's not your intention, name the term that, make it net 15, and then just enter the payables with the net amount.
Okay.
Yeah. But we can talk more about that in AP.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to get back to originally, payment terms just default to net 30.
Okay. So down here, I purposely set this the vendor number up to be another ship point for Diageo, just to show you an example. So this is what Corey was talking about. So your reporting vendor ID, this is only going to be filled out if you do have multiple ship points under one vendor. So if this was just a brand new vendor, only ship point, you would actually leave this blank here. So what this does down here, it groups all of those vendor ship points under one vendor and then sends it off to your depletion agency. Does that make sense? Okay. And then down here we have your depletion reporting agencies. It's important to note that although it doesn't look it here with this VIP distributor ID, the way it's set up inside Infusion, VIP always needs to be first if you have VIP, and then you set your others up next. So you'll set your depletion agency up here, then your reporting vendor code is what VIP knows the vendor by. So you want to set that up there. And this I just did an example of BDN as well. I do not believe you're using sample reimbursement, so we can breeze over that.
Yeah, if you wanted to specify that by supplier, you guys do it by reason code though, so that's not gonna be applicable.
And then we have a couple of notes here that we can attach to the vendor. I believe the only one you're going to use though is PO note. This is the same PO note that we were setting up on that purchase order. So when you set this PO note up, it's going to be it's going to be stored at the vendor card. And so every time you set up a PO again, it's going to come with this note here. And then you just come up here and hit the submit and clear button, and then it'll submit it inside Infusion. Anybody have any questions about this at all? All right, I think that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, I know you guys are a little new to it, so I'll be here till Friday. Just pull me aside, and if you have time, I'll go over this stuff with you, and we'll head down to your office. So, thanks, guys.
And we do have